The event tonight, we run them every few months, and the point is to really bring an entrepreneur into the community or as part of our community to really share their story. That can be successes and failures. So we're gonna cover some of both tonight. And it really is just an opportunity to get together and meet each other and share a story and learn. So Brenda is here tonight from Vancouver. Brenda is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Silicon Sisters Interactive. It's a gaming studio that focuses on, that is run by women and builds games for women. If I'm saying that, you can maybe correct me
Correct.
after. All right. It is one of the first female-owned studios in Canada.
The first.
The first studio, female-owned studio in Canada. Before that, she was a partner at Deep Fried Entertainment, which built a number of different console games that you will probably recognize. We'll get into that as well. And Brenda has a varied past. She's also studying law. She's worked at the Cancer Society. We'll get into more of this. But let's give a warm welcome to Brenda.
Thank you.
All right, so I don't think you're allowed to not answer questions tonight.
No problem. Bring it on.
All right, so well, let's start with some easy ones. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Nanaimo. My girlfriend over there, who I grew up with, is in the house, Tara, and Sharon also. So it's the Nanaimo girls representing. So I grew up in Nanaimo in the 60s and 70s. It was very mill town. My people are working class, good work ethic. Used to save up my babysitting money and spend it at the arcade.
Awesome. That makes sense. So what was your favorite game as a child?
I was pretty addicted to asteroids, and there was some really good results, actually. Yeah, we were pretty good at asteroids.
You have some high scores in the game?
I had some high scores, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's your favorite game now?
Oh, that's really hard. Why didn't I predict that you were going to ask me that?
That'd be weird.
I expected you to ask what I'm playing now, but nobody says what is my favorite game now. Huh.
You can like shift, no passing though.
Okay.
Shift question. What are you playing now?
My not favorite game that I'm playing now for research is
Okay.
Kim Kardashian. Some people heard about this today.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's a Kim Kardashian game?
Oh, yes, there is. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So this game, and I apologize to anyone who was there at lunch because I was ranting a little bit about it, but you're going to ask me about hits and failures. So I was offered the chance to build this game 8 years ago. And when I was first given the chance, I guess it wasn't 8 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, when I was first given the chance to do this, I thought, Kim Kardashian, who is this person? I don't know who this person is. What is she famous for? Nothing, right? She was famous for a sex tape, right? And when I build games, I think about the question, what is the fantasy? What is it that you're jumping into to experience as you play this game? And I couldn't figure out what it was for Kim Kardashian. Well, Kim Kardashian was the #1 game on the App Store. It made 1.7 in the first 3 days. It's expected to gross 80 million in the first 24 months. Kim Kardashian herself is going to make over 40 million on the game. Did I mention I passed on this game? So yeah, I'm playing it. I'm playing it for research. Yeah. I play a lot of games for research.
All right.
And that's one of the things about being in the games industry. I don't know, how many people are in the games industry? You raise your hands. Do you play games you love very much? Like mostly for me, it's weird, right? You go in the games industry, you think you're going to be playing games you love, but you actually never have time to play games you love. I mean, the new Dragon Age, I haven't even touched it. Like, that's insane, right? But you're always playing games for work. It's research, so that's why I answered it the way I did.
All right. Another easy one. Brothers or sisters?
Kinda.
I've got one of those too, don't worry.
There's one in every family.
2, actually, yeah. So that's okay. We'll leave it there. So I see you went to University McGill, then to University of Victoria. then to University of Phoenix, and now you're studying part-time at UBC.
I have a problem.
Yeah, you said it. So, like, what kind of student were you and are you? Maybe that's different now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that different. I love being a student. I think being a student is this incredible treat. You know, there's tremendous privilege in spending your time studying. You know, I hear people complaining about being a student, and I just think they're insane people. You know, to me, getting the chance to just focus on studying and learning is just candy. And, you know, I'm 47 years old, right? Like, I'm way too old to be in school. I know, I get it. I'm the oldest person in UBC Law. I'm doing a law degree part-time. I'm going to be really old. Actually, I'm going to be 50 when I graduate, which is ridiculous. I get it. But it's just such a treat to study what you care about. And it kind of hit me one day. I was sitting with two lawyers in my studio and asking them questions, and I was thinking, their job is so interesting. It's way more interesting than my job. And then I thought, why am I accepting that? Like, I can change that. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to do that too. So that's how that happened.
So your next step is to be a lawyer?
Well, yeah, my next step is I'm really interested in the interplay between the law and digital media and expression and creativity, and you know, there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening right now as the world changes because of our interactions on the internet, and law is way behind, and I just find that really fascinating. And I spend a lot of time on, you know, trademark stuff and licensing and international, you know, all that stuff, and I find that super, super interesting. So I'll either take that in-house and just do it on my own and run the studio that way, or I'm not sure exactly what it looks like yet, but that stuff is fascinating.
All right. All right. So your degrees are international relations.
Oh man, you did your research. I can't even remember what my degrees are.
Let me tell you. International relations.
Feel free to take a nap.
Yeah. Mid-East studies, social work, and your MBA, and now law.
That doesn't make sense to you, Andrew? What's wrong?
Okay. So you worked at the Canadian Cancer Society.
Yeah.
And then somehow now you are into gaming. So like how did...
Okay. Well, we're all friends here, right? I can tell a personal story. You won't tell anybody. We're streaming.
We're streaming online.
So, you know, I think that my story, which is quite eclectic, is not that unusual, really, because often women, and especially women who want to have children, you end up making decisions that need to change, you know? And so my first passion was the Middle East, and I did a degree in Middle East studies, and I lived in the Middle East, and I had an opportunity to work for the UN, and I learned Arabic, and I was really fascinated by questions of women in the Middle East, and I wanted to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict. Like, why wouldn't you want to solve it? You know, you're just a kid from Nanaimo, come on. So, you know, that's kind of what my first passion was, and that made a lot of sense when I was a single person, but when I met my husband and we had children, you don't really want to be in a war zone raising kids, so you switch. And, you know, I did a quick and dirty social work degree and worked in social work for a little while and realized that I'm really not a social worker. But every place I worked at in social work I ended up running the company. So I would come in as a social worker and then I'd run the company. And then I'd figure out, oh my God, this nonprofit is so badly run. Like, there's so many potential efficiencies here. And then I'd fix it. And then I'd get a reputation of being sort of a fixer, and then they'd hire me somewhere else and I'd fix that. So that's how I kind of rose up from being a social worker to working at the Canadian Cancer Society and running the Vancouver-based office. So it was a little bit more logical than it sounds. I did my MBA, you know, you see McGill, right? I was a McGill scholar, and then University of Phoenix, and you kind of go, But that's because I could do it at 2 a.m., right? While my kids were sleeping. You can't do an MBA at Queen's while your kids are sleeping. You can't. But you can do an MBA at University of Phoenix while your kids are sleeping. So I literally did that degree between midnight and 2 a.m., which was awesome, right? It worked really well for me. Mm-hmm. And it's not prestigious, I get that, but that's not why I did it. I did it so I had tools so I could run a company. And it was really, really helpful. So I would say to people, you know, it depends what you want. If you're after prestige, that's not your degree. If you're after tools, jump in. It was fabulous. So again, we're all friends here. I'll tell my story. I got divorced, and the Cancer Society didn't look that good anymore because I was drawing a nonprofit salary. So I kind of did this, where could I make some money in Vancouver? And it was 2004. And this was a really interesting time in Vancouver because there were small groups spiraling off of the larger companies, EA mostly, splinter groups, and they saw the opportunity that was coming with handhelds, right? So this was going to be all the rage, the PSP and the DS, and that was a pivotal time because before that, when you were building a video game, you needed a massive team and some serious money. Okay, not massive. Today is massive. Wrong word. You needed a big team and some money. But with, the DS and the PSP, you could build a great game with, 15 to 20 people and a $2 million budget. So it was a totally different scenario. And that was a great opportunity. And I saw people, forming little studios, and I thought, how do I get on that? I know how to run teams. I know how to, when I think about my relationship managing donor relations, working with, people who were philanthropic, who were supporting the Cancer Society, that was very parallel to working with publishers, right? So it's all investor relations is very similar. When I was thinking about running my teams at the Cancer Society who were providing services, that was very similar to running a team. So the skill set carried over. And we started Deep Fried Entertainment in 2004, built a number of different products, and we were very fortunate. We were really lucky. We were quite successful. But, I was lucky. I met these guys 5 guys leaving EA, and, they had been original guys in the Need for Speed team. And my job was to go down to California and sell my team and bring in product. It was like somebody said, do you want to represent the Rolling Stones? I mean, this was not hard, right? Like, these guys were really well known, so I was lucky.
All right. Sometimes you need that. Do you think you make your own luck?
I think people who are entrepreneurial recognize luck. Like, they see it, they see an opportunity for it. So they create they sow the seeds, right? And luck is the seed. So you create that, you invite it, I think.
All right.
Would be my metaphor.
All right.
You buy that?
Yep.
Okay.
I think you sow the seeds.
All right.
Yep. You got to open some doors. Eventually the right one opens.
Exactly.
So what's the opportunity in gaming? I'm no expert in this, but I read that it's about a $90 billion industry. Continues to grow. Like, what's the big deal? Where do you see the most opportunity going forward?
So this could take hours. Like, honestly, there's so much opportunity. Like, really, there is. I mean, I'm not going to take hours, Andrew. Don't worry.
Perfect.
It's okay. It'll be all right.
I got a few more.
Okay. So maybe to ask what's the biggest opportunity. I think there's this incredible thing happening in gaming right now. I talked a little bit about when the DS and the PSP were launching.
For those who don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Nintendo Dual Screen and the Sony PlayStation Portable. But really what it meant was we had game machines that weren't this big, that were attached to your TV, but they were this big and could go in your purse. That was the big change. And what's happened since that time is now we have games, gaming devices that are this big. All of you have them in your purses and pockets right now, right? So that change has completely morphed the games industry again. Mobile it's been the next big thing for the last 3 years, right? But it continues to be the next big thing. It's just growing on astronomical growth, right? Like double to triple. So what's really interesting about that is for a long time, games, the decision about okay, let me run a parallel. Over here you have movies, and here you have games, okay? And if you think for a minute about genres of movies, just think for a minute about maybe your favorite top 10 movies and how similar or different they are from each other. There's so many different genres of movies. And then you think sort of like the last maybe 4 or 5 years ago, before now, genres of games. There's a real discrepancy there, It's like we only have Bruce Willis, right? We've really concentrated in a very set way what games look like. And why? I mean, it's just a medium. There's no reason it has to be just that. That's what we've chosen to do, right? That's about the people who are making the games. That's about risk aversion by the decision makers. So when you ask the question, what the big opportunity is now. The opportunity is those decision makers are gone, right? Because now you've got these small studios who are building games directly without funding coming from publishers, without content decisions coming from publishers, content decisions being made by the developers. So the opportunity for what games are is as big as the universe, right? What are games now? They're as big as you want them to be. So there's no sense that we have to, although we are still doing the same thing, like a lot of the same thing. If I see another Angry Birds clone, I may take my life in front of you right now. But we don't have to be. We don't have to be doing that. I mean, you can build any kind of game you want. And, you know, our first game at Silicon Sisters is about empathy. Like, there's no way I could have built that game 4 years ago, right? The whole world is changing in gaming, and who is making the games is changing. So that's the big opportunity is new markets, new people making games, new, you know, everything. The media is just being blown wide open, and I think that's incredible.
So we're going to jump around a little bit here. So we'll come back to Deep Fried, but your first game, how can you talk a little bit more about it being based on empathy? That's like, I'm not a gamer, but when I play games, they're not about empathy.
Not so much.
Like, typically it's shooting and killing.
Yeah.
So can you talk about how that's different? How
Yeah.
can you embed a word like empathy into a game?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I have to back up a little bit and have you imagine what it was like when we were starting our studio. So,
Which one?
Silicon Sisters.
Okay.
So leave Deep Fried, have a bunch of money to invest in Silicon Sisters, bring on a phenomenal founding partner, Kirsten Forbes, who ran a 350-person studio in Vancouver called Radical Entertainment. You know, deep, incredible experience, been in the gaming industry 15 years, incredibly well respected, just an awesome woman who I'm so lucky to have as a co-founder. So, and it's interesting because Kirsten left around the same time I left Deep Fried, and she just called me one day and said, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a studio for women. I'm like, what? I just did that. Are you crazy? Like 3 months ago, I just incorporated. Let's sit down. So imagine us sitting in the studio saying, okay, well, we both know we want to build games for girls, and we both know we don't want to build kind of those games for girls. We want to build new, innovative, you know, deeply integral games for girls that provide something deep, real, honest. And we did this sort of evaluation about, so what is it about video games that make us fall in love with them? Like, why do we love this immersive experience so much? And I remember, you know, sitting at a talk, and the head of Zynga was speaking, and I was the only woman in the room, and he said, you know, games are about us playing our fantasies, you know? And I thought, yeah, really? Like killing aliens and driving cars and getting touchdowns and playing football and, you know, World War II, maybe a little. But it's not my fantasy. Like, those are other people's fantasies. Like, what is my gaming fantasy? What are women's gaming fantasies? Even harder yet, what are girls' gaming fantasies? We have no idea. What we have is what we think, what a 20-year-old dude programming thinks a girl's fantasy is. So their shopping and their sororities and their, right? That's not the same thing of what the girl's fantasy is,
Lots
right?
of pink.
Lots of pink, throwing a pony, some sparkles, a rainbow, boom, boom, ship the sucker, right? That's not, no, it's true. There's a word called pinkify, pink it, you know, shrink it and pink it. That's a thing. That is actually a model, shrink it and pink it. I'm not even kidding, right? So historically, when we've built games, it's fascinating. If you ever get a chance to read, what is the name of that book? From Barbie and Beyond, do I have the name right? Anyways, phenomenal book that actually looks at the history of girls in games. And there's this really crazy cyclical thing that happens, which is we kind of want to take a risk on trying a game for girls, but we don't want to spend a bunch of money because we know girls don't like games, right? Obviously, they don't like games. They're not buying them as much as boys because they're not building them for girls. But they don't like games, so we'll spend a little bit of money. But we don't want to put our best people on it, so we're going to put those people on it, and we're going to cut the budget by 70%. And then the girls will, you know, we'll see if they like it. Well, you know what? When you build shitty games, people don't want to play them. And that is not a gender issue. That is not a gender issue, right? To make a good game, you got to spend the money, you got to put the people on it. And that, for years, we weren't doing that. So the shrink it and pink it model is a real thing. I mean, I was at a conference at Nordic Games where there were some guys who had, this is going to be recorded, right? Okay. I won't call them out. But they had built this very successful pink game that did really well about 2 years ago and was in the top 10 on the App Store. And I just jokingly, we'd all been drinking and we're a bit silly, and I said to them, oh, you're in, women in games. Oh, you must have played our game. And I said, your game feels like it was a dude game that you spent 4 weeks changing over and pinkified and then shipped the sucker. And he was shocked and he goes, who did you talk to? He literally did. That is exactly what they had done. They had taken a gangster game and they had turned it into a sorority game and they had shipped it. And that's how they build games for girls. So backing up, how do we get empathy into a game? We wanted to ask the question, so we didn't want to do any of that. We wanted to figure out, what are those amazing things what is it that would make girls really connect, that they really would want to play, that would feel, like something that they would, the equivalent of racing that car through the streets of Hong Kong, the equivalent of getting that touchdown. Like, what is that buzz, that I rock the world, that feeling that you get from playing games? Like, where is that for girls? And some of it is in sports. The sports games for girls are awesome. But I didn't need to build those games because some of that's happening. So we spent a lot of time with different high schools researching. It's a good thing I'm a gal, because I was sitting and watching girls at recess like day after day after day. I would be in jail right now if I was a dude. So lucky that didn't happen. But we really looked at this, and you watched at recess, the guys are kicking around the ball, and some girls too, and then the gals are this group, that group, and we have all these negative words for it, like gossip or getting in each other's business, but it's not. These are social engineers, right? There's a lot going on in these groups, and these girls are pulling the strings, and they're orchestrating it, and they're negotiating. And, going back to my MBA, there's this thing called emotional intelligence. You guys know about emotional intelligence, right? They teach you that when you do your MBA. Well, these girls are doing it, right? That's what they're doing. They're learning those skills, right? So what is that? And what is it that they care about? So we started interviewing them, and they were saying things like, well, I heard Karen's brother broke his leg, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. That's what she was doing at recess, right? Or I can't believe Carolyn wanted to date David because Lisa's with David, and that's all screwed up. I'm like, how do I build that into a game, right? Well, how you build it into a game is that person is practicing empathy. And that person's ability to impact other people positively is a super powerful tool, right? And that's what girls are learning, and that's what girls are doing, and that's what girls groove on. And when you hear Miss America say, oh, I just want world peace, it's not as lame as you think, because they actually do just want world peace. Like, there is this sense of wanting to make the world a better place, which we need to figure out how to gamify, because that's an awesome game that women and girls will play, right? So that's how empathy fits into it. So School 26, our first series, you're a girl that walks into a high school, and there's 7 really troubled girls, and your job is to help them, not girls, pardon me, 7 troubled people, girls and boys. Your job is to help them figure their shit out. And if you can do that, then you level up. But you don't level up without your friends. Like, you can't actually graduate without all your buddies, right? So it's really interesting. In the second game in that series, the game mechanic is secrets. So, instead of picking up gold coins and, getting better armor, you collect secrets, and you can use them for good or for evil, and that affects your ability to level up. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to figure out, like, what do girls groove on?
And are guys playing this too?
We have a lot of gay boys who love what we're doing. It's awesome. It's great. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, let's skip back to Deep Fried for a second. You mentioned that it was your job to go to California and raise money. Can you talk about that?
So the business model at the time was a work-for-hire model. So it was less meeting to raise money and more looking for projects. Okay. So a little bit different. And it was really interesting and really fun and really crazy. I signed my first deal in a hot tub wearing a red bikini at 2 a.m. Those were the days.
I don't want to go there.
Yeah, there's really nowhere to go beyond that. That was my line, but I went there.
All right, all right, okay. So, what were some of the toughest challenges, other than that's how you had to get a deal?
I had to wear, no, it wasn't how I had to get a deal. To be honest, that was just That was just us having fun. I didn't have to play that card to get a deal, fortunately. What are the toughest challenges? So it's a weird thing in the games industry when you're a woman, because it's getting better now. I know it's also getting worse, like it's a weird parallel. But at the time that I first was in the industry, 2004 and on, there were fewer of us and very few, running the studio, right? So I would go to games conferences and people would say, "Oh, you must be here with your boyfriend. Who is he?" Like, I'm running the studio. Or, just all kinds of assumptions made. I mean, in Japan, I actually couldn't close a deal because, the man kept saying, "Oh, yes, who do I speak to about signing the agreement?" It's like, "Oh, you speak to me." "Oh, yeah, who do I speak to?" I'm like, "Oh, this is my husband, Eli. He can sign the agreement." Eli's like, "What are you talking about? He has nothing to do with games." "Oh, sign here." Right? Seriously, it was just like that, they could not get their head around it. So those were barriers. But if I were speaking completely honestly, which I think, we should talk about both sides, there were also benefits because, I looked different than the other people in the crowd, right? I wasn't a hairy dude, and it was easy for people to remember me. It's like, "Oh yeah, that girl doing that thing, that one that's tall." I'm very easy to remember.
From Canada.
Right, from Canada, right? It was, and I think I got interviews that other people might not have gotten. So yeah, there was some bias, but there was also some memorability win.
So that was your first entrepreneurial venture, is that right?
Well, I had a T-shirt company in college, but does that count?
Yeah, that counts.
My way through.
Was it a successful exit?
I wound it down.
All right.
But yeah, I made some money to help me through college.
Nice. So what made you decide to be an entrepreneur a second time? That's a scary, that's not like getting a paycheck every month.
Yeah, it's true. I wanted so badly to have a studio building games for girls. I just wanted that so bad, Like the whole time I was at Deep Fried, I just kept thinking, who's building for girls? Who's building? Why are we just leaving them out all the time? It was burnt. By the time I left Deep Fried, it was burning. I don't even think I had a choice. I think I was just in must do next thing, right? It was just so necessary for me to do it, And when we made the choice to focus on girls between the ages of 10 and 14, that wasn't actually a strategic business choice. That was, these girls have the crappiest games in the history of the world, we have to fix it. Right? It was not even, there was no I would be kicked out of my MBA program on my decision making, right? It was just, this is pathetic and we have to fix it. Both Kirsten and I have daughters, and we just felt like, really? That's all they get? And look at what the guys get. It's just, crazy.
All right. So are you targeting, again, this is my research here, I'm not a gamer. Apparently there's core gamers and casual gamers.
Yeah.
What are you targeting? And are you a core casual?
Am I personally a core casual gamer? Depends on which stage of my life. I haven't had time to play games for quite a while because I'm going to law school and running a studio, and there's no time in my life. So I don't really, I casually game because, that's how much time I have, but it's killing me that I'm not playing Mass Effect right now. So, sorry, Dragon Age.
Are you going home tonight to game?
No, I can't. I seriously, I can't, because it'll be 20 hours later, and I just don't have 20 hours. So it's just not going to happen. I don't even start, right? And I've been like that for a couple of years now. So I don't think I could say I'm really a gamer anymore. I'm doing more casual stuff. But yeah, the core and casual is, and those lines, I don't know, there are other people in gaming here who know that those lines are completely obscured and blurred now. It used to be that we would describe core was kind of console gamers, and they spent, 25 hours or 40 hours a week gaming, and they spent X number of dollars and blah, blah, blah. And casual gamers would game once in a while, and they'd play, for 15 minutes at the bus stop. But if you've ever been to Casual Connect and you meet some of these people who are casual gamers, these chicks are hardcore. They're spending 40 hours a week. They're dumping tons of money. They've played every game out there. They're smackdown gamers, and we don't call them core, but they're really not casual. But they're playing casual games in a core way, just like there are casual players in the core market. So the words are broken, right? They don't really work. I think really what it is, it would be more reflective if we talked about what tablet what device are you gaming on, and how long do you game for. I think that would get us a better picture of the world. But the numbers are really different. So traditionally using core and casual and social and mobile, core gamers, they used to be 13, 17% women. Now it's around 35%. Mobile is about 50-50. Social games about 60 to 70% female. And casual games 50 to 60. So that's about how it breaks down. So for us, when I look at my market, those are the numbers I'm thinking about.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit more about the go-to-market strategy for a game? Like, so we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you know, sometimes you have to reset some expectations that you can't just put it on the internet or on the App Store and it will
Build it
sell.
and they will come. It's a great strategy. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it worked for that baseball diamond once. So
and that was fiction.
Yeah. So do you, like, how does it actually work? And do you have any advice for people here who are actually trying to launch games?
Yes, lots. It's a really wicked model right now. You know, mobile space is growing like crazy, and there's huge opportunities, and it's fairly inexpensive to build a game compared to ever before in history, and you can just launch it, and that's fabulous, right? But the reality is that's not enough. That's not even close to enough. And if you want to actually get any traction, the biggest barrier now isn't budget, which is what it used to be, and it isn't gatekeeper. We used to have everything approved, right? You couldn't have anything on Sony or Nintendo or Microsoft without approval. So the gatekeeper isn't the barrier. The money isn't the barrier. Our new barrier is discoverability. And most people know this. Discoverability is our huge challenge. So you can get around that with lots of bucks, right? You can get around that. But it's difficult. It's really difficult. User acquisition is really difficult. It's getting more expensive. You know, relationships with Apple are really difficult. It's very expensive. So, you know, the kind of what a lot of people do, and certainly what we've done, is build across many different platforms. So multi-platform development is a really great strategy to try and help with that, because it increases your chance for discoverability. And if you build something unique and interesting and get some traction, that's really going to help. But a strategy that I think is quite underutilized, which has been sort of quite beneficial to us actually, is identifying places that aren't necessarily the hot next thing, right? The hot next thing always leaves used to be hot other thing that needs content, right? Very often, whatever that last generation piece was is an opportunity. And I think a lot of people forget about that. So, you know, that's a neat thing to think about. And also secondary, I'll give you an example. So when the Kindle first came out, it was black and white. Nobody wanted to build games for the Kindle because it was black and white. The guys who built games for the Kindle kicked, like absolutely did so well, right? Because there was no competition, and competition is the barrier. So to figure out how to find a space that doesn't have the same level of competition is a really difficult but interesting thing to do. For us, our second series is a series of romance games, right? We're building romance games. And as I said, like, we can build everything into games, so why don't we look at what that is? And for us, that's romance. And where we've had our most traction has been on the Nook. That is not a gaming platform, right? But it's been really good for us. Amazon's been good as well. And so even though we launched on Apple and Google, you know, iTunes and Google Play, it's actually been Amazon and Nook that we've had our most traction. So I think thinking about, everybody wants their game to be a hit on iTunes, right? You want to be everybody wants that, and you think it's such a good game, and when I launch it, it's going to happen, and that's just not reality. And you can come up with strategies, and you can hire the right people to make that happen. If you've got deep pockets, you can still come up with really good strategies to make that happen. But if you're a scrappy small startup, I think you have to think in scrappy small startup terms, and that means looking for other markets where you can do something unique and playing the PR card as hard as you can.
All right. So you've been pretty successful so far, but you're an entrepreneur. You've got to have something that keeps you up at night.
Oh, do I ever?
What is that?
Okay. Well. 2008, right? Everybody knows 2008. Do you guys all know 2008, right? Everything downturned, like massive shift downturn, right? So at the time, I was running Deep Fried, and I had 5, actually we had gotten rid of 2 partners, so we were down to 3 of us. And there were two full partners, one half. So I owned 40% of the company, and I was the business person. The other 40% person was our lead coder, and the 20% guy was our art director. And, you know, when I joined DeepFry, I was the sixth person on. Even though I was the business person, I was the sixth person on. It was an engineering-heavy team, which meant awesome talent, phenomenal talent, like amazing guys. But it also meant that business came last, right? And tech came first. And there are great things about that, but there are costly things about that as well, because sometimes it's about the business. And 2008 was about the business, and I couldn't get them there. So what happened for me in 2008 was we had been doing pretty lucrative contracts, right? I mean, the model was you worked for a publisher, the margins were about 20%. I was making an additional 30% in currency exchange, which I was hedging. Like, we'd make $300 to $400 a year just on currency, and that's it, right? And we were just pushing it out to dividends to the owners. I mean, these were lucrative times. But 2008, the whole thing shifts. All of a sudden, all of those, you know, potential partnerships just went away, just poof, gone. And there were people talking about this newfangled device, this, you know, iPhone that was coming our way. And of course, I was plugged in. I mean, I knew very early on, long before a lot of other people knew, that iPhone was going to be it, right? I mean, I knew it in my bones that we had to develop for iPhone. And I could not get my team to develop for iPhone. I had such good projects, like it would kill you if you knew the projects we had in front of us for iPhone. They were such good projects. And I could not get my team to consider iPhone. That is not a gaming device. I will not build for mobile, because at that time mobile was crap. It was Java crap. I mean, that if you're a guy who built Need for Speed, are you going to build on a mobile device? Not a chance in hell, right? Not a chance in hell. And I could not pivot my team. I could not pivot my team. And it was brutal. I mean, there was an exact company like ours, like it was our doppelganger in New Zealand. Okay, we started at the same time. We built to around the same size. We were competing, right? They pivoted to iPhone, and they're one of the most successful companies. I mean, I don't know a better iPhone developer than those guys. And they're up to 175 people. You know, the guys that I started with didn't exit. Like, it was fabulous, right? I could not get my guys to pivot. So that's what keeps me up at night. And also, every endeavor that I'm involved in the future, I make it really clear, I will make the decisions. Right? My new partner, Kirsten, with Silicon Sisters, we're 50-50, but we have an agreement that when it comes to business strategies, I will make the final decision, because I will never let that happen again. Like, it just was awful. Ouch.
Ouch. That was a learning lesson, hey?
It was a learning lesson.
Mm-hmm. So who do you look for advice now?
You know, I'm on the board at DigiBC, and it's such a privilege to be on that board, because I'm surrounded by, you know, the person running EA, the person running Microsoft in Vancouver, Howard Donaldson used to run Propaganda Studios and Disney, just, you know, incredible people who've had amazing exits. And it's just Sasha Williams from here in Kelowna. Pardon me, it's just a wonderful board. And other boards that I'm on as well, I'm surrounded by really, really bright people who've had incredible experiences, and I schmooze with them a lot. I take off every opportunity I get to kind of bounce things off them. So yeah, I'm lucky.
So that sort of goes back to a different sort of question. Your journey so far, and the research I've done creeping on you online, clearly
you were invited. It's not creeping.
I was sort of, yeah. Your journey so far, like, it clearly demonstrates to me that you have a desire to give back. Mm-hmm. And sort of connecting the dots, you say now that when you look for mentors or advice or guidance, it comes from your volunteer work. Mm-hmm. So, like, can you talk about being involved in your community? Mm-hmm. Why do you do it? What does it give to you? What do you expect out of it? That sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of different things. So I'm on the board of DigiBC. I'm on the board of Wiki International out of LA, and I do a lot of community work in Vancouver. And I think, you know, whenever you see a change that you want to happen, it's your job to kind of make it happen. So that's part of what I'm trying to do with Women in Games International. But DigiBC is really about you know, I think we're so blessed to be in the tech sector in British Columbia. I mean, it's an incredible sector to be in. And yet, we haven't made it as great as it could be, right? There's still a lot that we can do. And like, for example, tonight in Victoria, what's happening is that, DigiBC is sitting down with a bunch of ministers to convince them that they should continue the IDMTC credit at 17.5%, which it currently is, or higher, so that we can maintain some competitiveness. I mean, note that both Montreal and Toronto are over 40%, right? We lose a lot of our workforce out east because we don't have competitive tax credits. So I think it's really important to work to create, and even, it's not about whether or not I benefit from it, it's about whether the sector can be successful here, because this is an incredible sector. You get to work with amazing, creative, intelligent people. They're building wonderful things. These are really good jobs that, have some stability. People coming out of university are feeding into it. It's a wonderful microcosm, and I think it's really easy to take that for granted and think it'll always be here, but it disappears. It disappears like that, and we've seen that happen in various places. It disappeared in Dublin. It disappeared in London. It could disappear here. I think all of us have, in my opinion, responsibility to keep that active and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep this microcosm happening, because it's a pretty special thing. What you guys have going in Kelowna right now is incredible. Honestly, the energy here right now and the sense of creative community that's going on is really special, and you got to keep that going. So I think that doesn't happen by accident, right? People have worked hard to create that. So I think it's really important that we do what we can to keep that going for future generations.
And what do you think are some of those keys to keeping that going?
Getting involved. Yeah, people just need to get involved. I mean, it's tough, right? Because we work crazy hours. I mean, everybody's working 90-hour weeks, and who has time to go out to a thing about a thing? Nobody. But here they are. Yay! I sometimes run into a sense of, politics don't matter to me, or, why would I join DigiBC, or what's the IDMTC? It's the Interactive Digital Media Tax Credit. For anybody who's not familiar, it's a really awesome way for us to bring some money back into small companies, big companies too, that are doing this kind of work in our communities. So, yeah, just that sense of being involved and really, keeping it going, keeping it growing, because it's not a given. It really isn't a given.
Mm-hmm. So, not just the gaming industry, but tech. I would say attitudes are changing for women in tech. What are some of the positive changes that you see here, and do you have any, or can you offer any advice for any women or men actually who want a career in this industry?
Yeah. Oh, it was so neat to go to that lunch today, right? With women in tech, so many really smart women sitting around the table. It made me happy, really happy. There's a lot.
Some awesome women here.
You got some awesome women here. Really accomplished, right? It was phenomenal. I've seen a huge change in the 10 years that I've been in games and in the tech world, and I think that, and this is what I said before, there's also a tremendous amount of change and there's a huge amount of ugliness. And why are how can both of those stories be true? So you're seeing more women in tech and you're seeing more women in games, and so why is it we're also seeing all this really hateful stuff with Gamergate and the Anita Sarkeesian stuff and all of that? And I think what actually is happening is that there's a pushback, more women are coming in and there's a pushback against it. And it's a small group of people that are pushing back, but they're super vocal and they're anonymous and they're full of vitriol, and it's really difficult. But it's not the majority, and the majority are really amazing. So it is changing for the better with a lot of junk on the side. And what I say to people sometimes is imagine that, it's a goofy metaphor. Okay, it's a goofy metaphor, but, to become a butterfly, you have to be a larva, and then you have the thing built around you, and there's a lot of gook, and then you're butterflies, and we're in the gook. We're just in the gook, and it's going to a good place, so we got to just climb through the gook.
All right. So just keep cruising.
Just keep cruising. But I really encourage young women. I'm always talking to high schools and to tell young women that despite those horror stories, come into the game space, because there's so much creativity here, and there's I'll give you an example. We get hundreds of applications. We're a small studio, but we get hundreds of applications from girls who want to work with us, right?
Can you send them to Kelowna? We have a few here that are looking for talent.
Totally, absolutely. And it's especially with game designers. And when I get their applications, I think, wow, you know, they're working at X big studio or Y big studio. Why would they want to come and work for me? And it's because they've been, you know, drawing wheels for 2.5 years, right? They're really done with the drawing wheels. And when I look at their resume and I look at what they built at school, there's these phenomenal game ideas, like just beautiful, beautiful games that never saw the light of day because they're drawing wheels for a racing game, right? There's so much talent, there's so much energy that doesn't see the light of day. And I think that's changing. I think those voices and those ideas and those games are starting to be built, which is really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the skills that are needed both on the technical side and on the art side? Because we have both sort of educational institutions here focusing on, well, 3 post-secondary schools. And they all, in a certain way, have training for both art and tech.
Yeah.
What are we looking for? And
well,
even going lower, what can children do?
Everybody needs to learn to code. That's just the bottom line. Code should be ubiquitous across everywhere, right? I mean, everyone needs to learn to code. That's just kind of the way it is. And, you know, it used to be that when I first started in games, and you look at a company, you know, like EA or larger studios, who have, these are our physics coders, these are our gameplay coders, these are our lighting designers, these are our, that doesn't exist anymore. In the small studios, you got to do everything, right? Not only do you have to code across all of those things, but you might have to draw some art and design a game as well. And by the way, can you come in and take a business development call, right? Like, you have to have a huge array of skills. It's a very demanding but super awesome time because, you know, you get to do so many different things. You're not going to be drawing a wheel for 2 years, right? It's all of that's changed. So I think really looking at a broad range of skills. When we hire people, we're hiring people that can do a lot of different things. We don't have the privilege of hiring, you know, that separately. And also, you don't really need that level of skill anymore because we're not coding in C++. Everybody's using Unity, right? You don't really need to have that level of skill. So to be very specific and just do one thing, I mean, I think those days are gone. And learning to code from a young age is absolutely key. There's a woman at Harvard right now who's trying to make it curriculum for every Harvard graduate to have taken a coding course. And I think that's really interesting, right? So it's just, code is, you know, everything, the internet of the world, right? The internet of things. If you don't know how to code, the world's going to get away on us. And what worries me is I read a really interesting piece of research that came out of the University of Alberta last year that said that kids who played video games were far more likely to choose something in the STEM area, so science, technology, engineering, math. And still, the big companies are building games primarily for boys. And there's this, you know, boys are still playing more games than girls and going into those categories much more than they used to. I mean, in the 1980s, it was 30% of women who were taking coding courses, and now we're down to somewhere between 15 and 18. So I think that all needs to change. I think code really should be something that we encourage all kids to do. It's really, really important.
All right. Can you code?
A bit. I can code a bit. I mean, I'm not a, you know, a bit.
You're not a coder.
I'm not a coder, but I can look at code and understand some of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can use Unity, and that's not really coding, but it's kind of...
I can't use
It's
Unity.
very basic.
All right. A couple shorter questions, and then we'll open it up to everyone here and on our Twitter feed as well. These are sort of simple, but sort of fun. I saw you tweet about the largest Scotch whiskey collection in the world.
Oh, my God.
Are you a Scotch drinker?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh, so many favorites. This is tough. So I'm an Islay Scotch lover. I love peaty Scotches. So the Lagavulins, the Laphroaig, the Bowmores, all that beautiful stuff, the Bruichladdich. But lately, I have fallen in love with the Macallan Ruby. You ever had a Macallan Ruby?
No.
There's no going back.
All right. Also, something lots of people I'm sure don't know is you're a pilot. How did that start?
started when I was 11, and my dad was a logger. And, sorry, can I distract with a funny story before I answer that question?
Yep.
So I was at McGill, right? I'm a small town girl from Nanaimo. And I moved in with this group of roommates, all with very fancy people who come from lots of money. And I'm from a mill town, and I was the first person to ever go to university for my family. And I was sitting in this group, and we were all been drinking, and everybody was talking, and this guy said, "Oh, my dad's a logger." I said, "Your dad's a logger? My dad's a logger." He said, "I said lawyer." Welcome to McGill, baby.
Yep.
It was right up there for the time that I said, "Ralph Lauren? No, I haven't met him yet." Live and learn.
So the town I grew up in used to have a convenience store and a stop sign.
Nice.
And the convenience store went out of business, so there's no stop sign anymore.
Yeah, you know my pain. So because Dad was in logging, he worked for a company that provided him a pilot to fly him out to these really remote places to fix logging equipment. And when I was a kid, I just wanted time with my dad as much as possible. So one summer he took me with him. And he was working all the time. So I got to fly around with his pilot in Alaska. And Alaska bush pilots are, first of all, the best people in the history of the world. And secondly, insanely crazy. And it was just the best summer you could ever imagine. And I always wanted to be a pilot after that. I always wanted to be a pilot. And I had the opportunity recently. My husband is a pilot and has a couple planes. And that's not why I married him. It's not why I married him.
All right. All right.
I'm sticking with that.
All right. So what are you most proud of?
Everybody knows I'm going to say my 3 kids, but my 3 kids.
All right.
Can't help it.
All right. So let's open it up to the audience here. Does anyone have some questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming up to Kelowna. So, segueing off that theme of small town, and okay, I'll say it this way. Could we entice you to come to Kelowna? Could we bring your company to Kelowna?
I've been saying all day, I wish I lived in Kelowna. I wish I lived in Kelowna.
So what would we need to do to get a company like yours to smaller towns throughout BC, or let's just pick Kelowna as an example?
Or
How
open
could we
your
do
next
that?
office here?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Or open her next office here?
Correct. Or open your next office.
Yeah, you know what? You guys have a lot going on here. Like, I'm not just saying that because we're in Kelowna, but honestly, today was a really interesting time for me, and I did have a bit of a bias coming up here that I didn't need to prep, right? I mean, they're in Kelowna. Like, they're all going to have Me Too games, and I'm going to have to be nice to them, and then I'll go home, right? That's what I kind of expected. And so what I had today was actually companies that completely blew my socks off, who were incredibly impressive, that I would, you know, be so proud to introduce to my network, and would, you know, just blown away by the quality of people I met today and the really interesting things happening here, both at the luncheon with Women in Technology and also with the people I met this afternoon. So, you know, the hardest thing to sell when you're trying to get people to come into your community is what's going on there. You guys have that nailed. I mean, there is a lot going on here. And I was saying earlier to Andrew that, you know, in Vancouver in 2005, there was this incredible vibe. It was right at the time the PSP and the DS were coming out, and there was just this sense of, I mean, it was almost like a spark in the air. You know, there was so much creativity and so much energy and so much opportunity, and it was building, and it was vibrant, and you'd walk down the street, and you know, it was thick with programmers, and you had to be careful also because people were poaching. Like, my guy would go to the cafe and he'd get 7 job offers, right? It's like, don't go buy coffee, I'll bring it to you, stay put. What do you need? And I feel like there's some of that going on here right now. So, you know, that toughest part, which is why would I come here? You've got answered. There's a lot of reasons people would come here. There's a lot going on. Communicating that, though, I think is, you know, to answer your question, what do you need to do? You need to communicate that. People need to know what's going on up here because it's pretty special. You know, I think what's going on with Accelerate Okanagan is really amazing too, and you guys probably are communicating all the time, I should think. But I would say come down and toot your own horn, right? Like, come down to Vancouver and talk about some of the stuff going on. The folks I met this afternoon, I mean, there's so many opportunities to collaborate with other companies in Vancouver. I think those kinds of connections would be really, really helpful. And would I move here? I would move here. Absolutely, I would move here. So I'll talk to my husband. I'll let you know.
Awesome. All right, who's next?
Hi. What's the average? Average age of female gamers?
What platform?
Any platform.
No such average on any platform. Consoles, it's in the mid-20s. Casual gamers and social gamers, it's 43. I was very happy when that number came out because I was 43. It's like, I'm the average gamer. It's finally happened. And then I had a birthday. Mobile, again, it's by platform, so there's a lot of variety. I think it's really important not to think in ways that aren't segmented. I mean, to integrate the gaming market, you have to think in segmented ways. You just have to, because it's so different. There's no such thing as a gamer. There just isn't. It's like saying, I'm going to sell clothing. What's the average consumer? Well, what are you selling? Where are you selling it? Who do you want to reach? What's the product? What's the price point? I mean, it's just, you just got to, the market is incredibly fragmented. So, when I build a game, I think about who I'm trying to reach, right? Who am I building a game for? Who am I trying to reach? Where do they play, right? I don't think I'm building a game for girls and I'm going to launch it. I think about where are they? For us, we use the lifestyle market segmentation tools, which are 26 different breakdowns of the female market. And at one point, we actually had drawings of them, right? We knew, so does this game include Betty, Susan, and Elizabeth? No, Elizabeth's over there. Okay, so you have to think that way. You have to think very strategically about who you're delivering to, how they're playing, what they might want to play.
Do you let people work from home?
Yeah, so I love my business partner. She's amazing, but boy, does she want people to work from home, and boy, I don't, right? This is a real big difference. It's hard because it's not just work from home, it's do we need to have a studio anymore? Do we even need to have a studio? Do we need to pay money to have a studio? And we don't. You don't. You can have a completely distributed work model. And a lot of people are doing that successfully now. So they have a game programmer in Bucharest, and they have a game designer in London, and their art team is in Taiwan, and their coder, whatever. You can do all of that, and it's very. There's a lot of savings in that, and because of the tools that we have now, you can have. We're a Scrum studio. We use Scrum. So you can have Scrum meetings in the morning just as you would if you were all in the same studio. You've got some challenges with time zones. You have to figure that out. My business partner, Kirsten, is a Scrum master, and she's brilliant. And I bet if anyone could handle this, she could. But I don't know if I'm old-fashioned or what it is, but I want to look people in the eye. I want to sit down with them. I want to see them. I'm going to lose that argument, just so you know. Like, there's no chance I'll win it. But I think there's something to be said for it, So, yeah, that's my answer. What do you think?
I'm part of a three-man startup, and right now I'm paying everyone's salary, so it bothers me when I don't see what they're doing.
Right? Yeah.
It's a compromise, and I don't feel we have the energy. I think we produce a lot more if we're in the same space.
Yeah. So you have to measure it differently when you're not working in the same space. You can't be on hourly. You have to be on deliverables, right? So if you're on deliverables and they have their own timeline and they're delivering, I guess that's fine. But I'm with you. I mean, it's hard to spend money when you can't see them, and that's probably about you and me needing to get over that, right? But because it is a proven model, people do have success with it. But I hear you. I feel the same way.
I was just wondering, going back to what you said about not being able to get your team to pivot, what kind of advice can you give with how to communicate best with your technical team, like from a business side, and kind of what have you learned from that?
Well, own 51%. Yeah. It's a funny thing. Are you in the game space? No. Yeah, I don't know if it's the same in your space as it is in mine, but what happened for us was that my business partners were making decisions based on their love of Nintendo. We were going to stick with Wii come hell or high water, right? And that was about Nintendo fanboyness, not about business strategy. So because the person that really held that viewpoint most strongly was the original person who brought me on board and had the vision of the studio, we weren't on equal playing ground to hash that out. So I think there's kind of two pieces to that. One is structure. You know, structure is incredibly important when you have your executive team and how decisions are made, and structuring it so that you know, if we come to an impasse, who has the final decision-making say, and it can't be both of us, right? Like in our studio, if it comes down, like I say, I don't want people working from home, I don't get to make that decision, because when it comes to production, she has the final say. When it comes to business, I do, right? And that's a production decision. So I think knowing what your structure is and what your decision-making is ahead of time is really, really important. In terms of communication, we communicated really well, like all the time, but we communicated that we disagreed. We communicated it great, but we couldn't solve it. Yeah.
So one of the questions is, video gaming is a very migratory type of work that you do. A lot of people move around. It's the same thing in the visual effects industry. A lot of people end up working in England and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of great talent that migrates away from Vancouver now. So I was just wondering, how would you think this is going to change the funnel going back the other way, that people come to Vancouver? And
It's starting already.
There? It's starting already?
Yeah, that's already happening.
Okay.
So in the last 5 years, we lost over 6,000 jobs to Montreal because of the tax credit challenge. In the last about year and a half or so, we've had people coming back. So DigiBC tracks those numbers, and I don't have them in my mind, but there is a sway, not 6,000 people, but there is a movement back the other direction. And it's not just tax credits, it's also, you know, job opportunities, lifestyle, you know, which companies are where, and so on. So right now, Montreal's trumping Vancouver in terms of both numbers and also number of large studios. Vancouver is trumping Montreal in terms of smaller entrepreneurial indie studios. Toronto is kind of winning the space when it comes to media relation stuff, building out media products for people, digital media, and kids games. So you see this sort of bifurcation going on. But I think if it continues to go the way that it is, and we keep the IDMTC or grow it, I think you'll see some growth in Vancouver, because a lot of people that move to Montreal want to come back.
Got another question too. How do you attract senior talent?
How do I what?
Attract senior talent in your company.
Attract senior talent. So we're a small studio right now. I haven't had to worry too much about that. At Deep Fried, it was a much bigger challenge because we were quite a bit bigger. I'd say a couple things. I think culture, you know, people talk about culture, but being really devoted to a good culture in your studio is massive. And that is going to be the #1 way to attract and keep talent. My business partner, Kirsten, is super respected in the industry. She's had lots of people, you know, thousands of people work for her over the years, so she can kind of pick up whoever she needs whenever she wants because of her reputation and because of the culture that she builds. So I think that's really important. If you build a culture that's respectful, that values people, you know, that people are going to know, yeah, again, just that sense of being really, truly valued, that's massive. If people feel they're being taken advantage of or they don't matter, forget about it.
I was just wondering who you have in terms of your developers. Do you have a combination of men and women working on the games for women? And is there value to having some diversity in the people that work on the games?
Such one of my favorite questions. So School 26, we had 2 coders, Felicity and Justin. We had 2 game designers, Shannon and Brendan. We had 2 artists, male and female, and me and Kirsten. That was it. So it was really neat because I've just had such a weird, very gendered roles. You know, when I was at the Cancer Society, I had 55 people reporting to me. There were 20,000 people before, you know, below them. Of that 55 people, 54 were female. And then I was at Deep Fried and I had 45 employees. They were all guys. And now I'm, you know, like it's just, it's really wonderful to work in a balanced space. You know, I personally would always choose that if I had a choice. And it's very respectful and very fun. And I think the game that we built, it just feels very balanced. It feels very inviting. And a lot of boys play that game. I mean, this is a game that I've said is for girls. This game is for girls. boys love playing the game, and I think that's fabulous. And there's an interesting thing, and I don't know the answer to this really, but does the gender thoughts, values, life experience of the person designing a media product enter that media product? Mm-hmm. I think it does, right? I think it does. And I remember for me, I kind of stumbled upon that because I was playing the hell out of Portal. Like, I played Portal like a crazy person. And it's not really my kind of game. I'm a Japanese gamer, right? So why was I playing the hell out of Portal? Like, what? And, I went down to GDC, and I was like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good, but I haven't slept for ages. I'm playing Portal. Really? I'm like, how are you doing? I've been playing Portal. All these women we were all playing Portal. It's like we're playing the same game, and it's not really, there's nothing about that game that says this is a game for women. And here we were, like crack addicts with Portal. And interestingly enough, Kim Swift was the main designer on Portal. And when I heard that, I thought, I wonder if I went back and looked at other games that got me wicked hooked if there were women on those teams. And lo and behold, 100% true. And I thought, wow, there's something here. There's something that we don't really talk about that's about who builds that game that gets into the game somehow. Anyways, I just think that's really interesting. So we play with that. And I have a rule in the studio that all final design decisions are made by a woman. That's it, right? If we're building for women, if we're building for men, all final design decisions are made by men. But that's it. Like, that's what we do, right? Because I think that design comes through. And I think that's why we've done such a bad job for girls in the past.
Do you have a process in place for people that want to contribute ideas for games for women? And if so, what does that look like?
No. No, really don't. It's so problematic to do that. For a whole bunch of reasons, but legality is a big one, a really big one. And we have more ideas than we can build. I don't need ideas. I need money and time and programmers, right? I don't need ideas. So no. And it happens all the time when we say, thank you very much for your offer, but we're not going to read it. And here's some of my very talented colleagues that you can speak to. Yeah, no, we don't.
Awesome, thanks for coming out tonight. My question is, when are you gonna go and launch a new product, a new game? How are you reaching out to those new users, the brand new users that never ever even seen or heard about you?
Yeah, that's a really big challenge. So one of the problems with being a smaller studio is how do you communicate at launch, and how do you get eyeballs on your game, and how do you deal with that whole discoverability issue? And what we've done, because we're smaller, we've taken a PR angle instead of an advertising angle, or instead of a buying eyeballs angle. So what that looks like for us is for example, with Everlove, right, and this is also why we build in series. We build in series because you build the community. You don't have to find someone new all the time. So our adult women were delivering a series of games. Our children were delivering a series of games. So you're not always needing to create new audience, right? So what we do is we use PR as much as possible. And it's not that hard for us to do because we're a unique story, right? So we can go out and say, well, we're women building games for women. That's not a very common thing. And so we get some PR. And it's really interesting to me because, I've bought advertisements in the past, but I've never had such huge hits as I had when I got an article in Vogue, an article in Flair, and a blog on Huffington Post. That sold buckets of games. So it's a very different strategy than when I was in Deep Fried, which was all about games media, right? And I don't buy users. I don't do any user acquisition at all. And we've been priced out of that. It's really expensive now. So. But I recognize that we're an unusual situation, although I met a couple of studios today who have really interesting stories that they could tell and use the same strategy, free PR. So it depends if you have something that's quite unique and that you can position for media that they'll grab their teeth into.
Hi. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on potential efforts in the gaming industry to break down some of the gender stereotypes? I know you're mainly to target the girls, but do you see any efforts where we don't have that gender divide anymore, or is it already you target, girls from 10 to 14, maybe that's your market segment, and then it's the majority of the girls already have so many gender stereotypes attached to them through society that it's already almost too late to take that away from them, or kind of to influence that?
It's a good question. So this isn't one of my favorite debates that I've ever had was with this phenomenal woman in Sweden who is a famous author. She's kind of like the J.K. Rowling of Sweden. She writes amazing vampire stories. She's really cool. And she sat down and she said, I know I'm supposed to like your studio, but I hate it. And I said, wow. Tell me why, because I'm surprised. Like, I really liked your book. And she said, I think it's bullshit that you're building games for girls. You know, I think that's bullshit. I think you should build games for everybody, and we need to live in a world that's not gendered. Bingo. And how do you argue with that, right? She's right. Wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world that wasn't gendered? How do you create that? Because we're so far away from it. So, you know, I see what we're doing as a step in that direction, and I do stop and think when I say we're building games for girls. I do stop and think, who am I leaving out? I don't like that. And I've thought, you know, is it possible to talk about these games in a different way that would invite boys in more? Because there are boys who aren't as rigidly gendered and who might really enjoy the game. But, you know, they are finding us. They are finding us. And a number of the guys who work for me are gay as well, which is interesting because often they... you know, gender is a spectrum, in my opinion, and people who fall in not the sort of traditional places on the spectrum have a hard time in my industry. And whether that's women or men or where you are on that spectrum, if you're not here or here, it can be really tricky. And so we're a place where it's not like that, where you're welcome and it's okay, right? So we attract employees that, you know, aren't as rigid. And I think we attract gamers in that way as well. But yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's a really interesting question, and it's a tough dynamic. And I think, you know, to answer your question about who's doing it and what's happening, there is some interesting stuff happening right now in Sweden and in Scandinavia. The uptake is small. You know, it's a long journey, but I think it's starting to happen. You know, some of my favorite games are. My favorite studio in the world is BioWare, which was an Edmonton-based studio that was bought by EA. And I really like their Mass Effect series, and probably a lot of people here have played it. And you can play as a femme shep, which is awesome. So the main character is Shepard, and you can be a male Shepard or a female Shepard, and you can have a lot of really different experiences. You can have a love affair with a man or a woman, and I think that's very... in any other industry that might not be that surprising, but in the games industry it's really shocking, right? Because we're a little behind. So I find that really exciting that that's happening, and I look forward to seeing what they do in the future. They've got a lot of pushback from it, though, lots and lots and lots. But again, we're moving forward, and it's starting to happen.
All right, let's call this next one our last question.
You referred to the low numbers of women in coding, and if you were talking to a parent of a young daughter who wanted to get their daughter into coding, would there be any advice that you would give them to, both in terms of helping them to develop interest, but also to not get discouraged by the culture or things like that?
Yeah. So one of the things that traditionally happens when girls get interested in code is they join a coding group, and it's mostly male-dominated, and they feel a little alienated and often quit. So I think that there's something to be said for coding in an environment that's all girls or is 50-50. So there are some really amazing girls that code programs that are up and coming all over the world. I don't know what's happening in Kelowna. I know what's happening in Vancouver, but certainly I can connect you with some links, or I could put them up on my website if you like. But there's some really interesting initiatives that are focused on getting girls to code, and creating it in a space that's really accepting and open and doesn't build in a whole bunch of expectations, I think is really important. And there's some great work being done on that right now. But there's a lot of large studios, though, that are building platforms for kids to make their own games. Microsoft is doing that right now, for example. And there's a lot, probably there are people here who can mention other programs that are available for kids. And I think that's a great way to go, you know, just to have that experience of figuring out, you know, if I do this, then I get that. It can be really exciting. So yeah, there's a lot out there. I don't have anything on the tip of my tongue, but there's quite a bit going on. Do you happen to know? We have a person who's a professor of computer science at UBC. Do you happen to know? No? It's the other one. Oh, it's the other UBC gal. Darn. Oh, and Minecraft camps. Great point. Absolutely. Minecraft camps are fantastic. And Minecraft's fabulous because it really attracts both boys and girls. And one of the cool things about Minecraft is there's a lot of people, there's a huge trend right now in the gaming industry to videotape what you're playing and to have it on YouTube, and people follow you, and it's all very exciting. And that happens in Minecraft as well. And there's some phenomenal girls that are posting what they build in Minecraft. So, there's this sort of saying in the women's movement that if you can't see it, you can't be it. Right? So if you don't see women coding, you can't be a women coder. So creating that, here, see it. Like, look what these guys are doing. It's phenomenal. It's amazing. And if you can see it, then you can be it. So it's part of that sort of modeling piece. And I think digging up some of those amazing videos on Minecraft of what folks are doing would be really helpful.
I'd suggest there's a program that Khan Academy came up for programming, and they did an hour of code about 4 months ago to get all the schools in North America coding for 1 hour during one day.
Wow.
I think they called it Sketch or something, but it's an interactive coding program that if you go to Khan Academy, you can actually teach you how to code to build shapes and objects.
Everybody catch that? Khan Academy? Is it, how do you spell it?
K-H-A-N.
Okay, it's like Khan, that Khan. Okay, got it. Oh. That's where you need the rules. Yeah, the egg timer, tick, 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 tick.
All right, well, we'll close it off there. I just want to thank everyone here and everyone online for streaming in. It is such a pleasure to be a part of a community like this.
Yeah, you guys are lucky.
Yeah, and let's give a warm round of applause for Brenda. Thank you so much for coming.